Welcome to Tent Talks. I'm Missy.
And I'm Mariah. I'm a certified nurse midwife, and I'm a mom of 3 children, 7 and younger.
I'm a mom of 5, pregnant with my 6th. And we came together because we're women, just like you, and we saw a need. So we created a platform and a community for women called Beyond the Red Tent.
Right.
And we're taking it one step further.
To TED Talks. So TED Talks is a space where you can come and learn from vetted experts, real women that are willing to share their courageous stories about topics of holistic women's health.
And so you're here. We understand life is full. You're a busy woman. So this is only going to be about 30 minutes of a beautiful talk with either an expert or a real woman like yourself. So grab a cup of tea, sit back, and enjoy.
All right, Mariah Brown here with Beyond the Red Tent, Beyond the Red Tent. And I have Courtney Curry here today with us, along with my daughter who decided not to nap. And we're just going to talk about her journey, her story. And the story is around ovarian cancer. The story is around being a mother. The story has a great ending. Not that it's ended. It is a great part of the journey, I guess. Right, Courtney?
That's right. That's right. It's been a great next step in the journey.
Yeah. So let's go to the beginning.
Okay.
Tell me about what it was like giving birth and in the labor and delivery unit, and then what?
Yeah. So we, 9.5 years ago almost, we were giving birth to our second child, Patrick. And a couple weeks prior to him actually being born, I started carrying too much amniotic fluid. And we made a decision based on blood work, based on what they were seeing, that we should just go ahead and go in and get him out via C-section. And really didn't think anything of it. So we went in, we walked in that morning, got prepped, ready for C-section, and gave birth to this beautiful baby boy. And then I laid in recovery. We were in Chicago at Northwestern Memorial Hospital. And if you know anything about it, it's a teaching hospital. So there's always slews of people coming in and out. And in recovery, this massive team of doctors walked in with my husband. And it was there that we heard for the first time that I was covered in tumors. I had tumors all over my one ovary. They use the term peppered. It was in my small intestines, in my stomach lining, and in my liver. And it was going to take a couple of days to confirm the biopsies, but they were concerned.
And of course, I feel, I believe a lot in our mind and our words, and so I'm protective of even having you retell the story. And so I just want to say out loud, I'm surrounding you with a bubble of protection. And this is something that was Control-Alt-Delete, return to sender.
That's right.
From way back in the past. And it's simply for the sake of sharing your journey so that other women out there can hear what your journey was. And maybe they're longing to not feel alone. They're curious around what it was like. So what was that like for you to hear those words? I mean, obviously, I imagine there's this rejoice of I'm now a mom and I have this beautiful baby, and then also the dichotomy and contrast.
I think it's in that moment, so we have 2 kiddos. We have a 12-year-old and a now 9-year-old. And so at that moment, I think I was really kind of dreaming about what life was going to be like when he met his big brother. What would that look like? What would he say? What was our life as a family of 4 going to look like? And for them to kind of walk in, it was like it was a bad dream. It was like somebody was just interrupting my dream. And I kept thinking that it was the medication wearing off. I kept thinking, well, maybe I imagined this. Like, maybe this isn't real. And over the next few hours, just trying to process it with my husband, who truly, I have to tell you, we all know those looks on someone we deeply love's face, right? We know that look of of I'm scared. And when he walked in that day to the room, he looked as though he had lost his best friend. He was just sheet white. And so I think it was loss, it was confusion. It was, how could this be happening? This is supposed to be the most amazing time in our lives. And it was an interruption, confusion.
Mm-hmm. And were you having any symptoms leading up to that led anyone to be just curious or searching for what could be going on?
I think no. I think back to it. No, we didn't have any symptoms. And part of that, so ovarian cancer they talk about it often. It's the silent killer. There's not a whole lot of symptomology that come up that you don't dismiss as being like, oh, it's digestion. It's something to do with, hormones, or, oh, I just must be bloated. It must be, whatever. We have so many reasons that we can just kind of dismiss it and go, it's nothing. It's nothing. And being pregnant, I very much dismissed anything because I was like, oh, it's just pregnancy. It's just this new life inside of me forming. And there wasn't any reason to think maybe something's wrong with me. It was in the moment of hearing you're carrying too much amniotic fluid that I was like, what's wrong? What's wrong with the baby? Not what's wrong with me. What's wrong with him? Is he okay? And when all the tests were coming back good, but my blood work was kind of iffy and they were having some concerns there, it was like, we just need to get in and take a look around, make sure everything's okay. And you're kind of like, well, okay. You don't know what you don't know.
Hmm. And so then what happened next? Okay, so there's this diagnosis. You've just had a new baby. Did you guys go directly home? And so what happened next?
Yeah. So, that day in the delivery room, they could only assume that there was, we were covered in tumors. They couldn't really tell me much else. And so, you get out of recovery and you go to your room and you're there and you're on pins and needles waiting. And it was day 2 of being in the hospital recovering from a C-section that they walked in and confirmed that I had stage 4 epithelial ovarian cancer. And it's one of those things that maybe not as much now, but 9 years ago, I was like, wait, isn't that something that older people get? Like, really? I'm young. I'm in my 30s. And so it was kind of just this confusion of, okay, and stage 4. We hear stage 4 of anything, right? And we're like, it's horrible. It's horrible. And so I think that was a really defining moment. It was a moment where things really shifted for me in my mind. And it was like, okay, all right, we know what this is. It's time to fight. Like we have 2 babies. We haven't even taken one baby home. Okay, what do we have to do? Where do we go? What do we do now? And you kind of get into that mode, like a protective bear, like, okay, how do I control this? How do I fix it?
Mm-hmm. And so what were the options at that point?
Well, we had 2 options. We could do intraperitoneal chemo, or we could do a standard form of chemotherapy with a radical hysterectomy. And we opted for radical hysterectomy and regular chemotherapy because one thing I will really, really thank my oncologist for, now is looking back, he always taught me to be my own best advocate. He always taught me that, listen, it's not about just what I say, it's about what you go home and you learn. So don't just take what I say and go, oh, okay, yes, yes, yes. Go home and look at it. Take a really good look, investigate before you commit. And so as we were talking about intraperitoneal chemo, I felt like maybe I wouldn't even make it a few months. I was terrified because as they were talking about the risks of liver failure and how quickly these things could happen and, organ shut down, I went, oh, and it was still a fairly new concept 9 years ago. So we went with a radical hysterectomy and started chemo a week after my hysterectomy. I sort of kind of walk you through that journey. So that was day 2. Day 4, we were sent home. We discharged, took my baby home, and we were home for 2 weeks. And I went back in. It was enough time for them to say that I had surgically healed from a C-section, turned around, went back, reopened the incision, and went in for radical hysterectomy. And a week later, I started chemo.
Wow. And so I'm assuming breastfeeding was not in the picture.
Not an option.
No breastfeeding. And okay, so when you say he encouraged you to go home and do your own research, I feel like part of the reason I'm so passionate about Beyond the Red Tent is we're bringing vetted experts, because you can Google and find everything under the sun, including the world is still flat.
Right.
So where did you go? What are the right resources that you found where you felt like these were vetted experts and sound information?
Well, I think, we all start with Dr. Google, right? And we all go, okay, Google will have all of the best information. And the truth is Google has whatever you're going to look for. Whatever you're seeking, you're going to find. And so when I realized that I was finding a whole lot of just commentaries, a lot of people's personal experiences, what I was looking for was research. And so that's where I went. I started going to the journals. I started looking up what studies were being done, what studies had been done, started really looking at the drugs that they were going to have me taking. Where were they researched? Who were they researched on? What was I to expect? Were these things that I could prepare and handle? And then you start looking for the things that you can control, because you can't control what you don't know is going to happen with a medication. You can't control the diagnosis that you've been given, but you're searching for your own pieces. For me, it started with, this is going to sound so silly, but it started with when I was going to lose my hair. I needed to know exactly when I would lose my hair, and I needed to have control over that. And then it was slowly but surely things like sleep and water. But I'm going to be honest with you, one of the things that back then I didn't even look at was what I was eating. They told me to eat whatever I could eat, whatever I could tolerate. And I thought, okay, sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
So I worried about sleep. I worried about infection risk, and I worried about my hair loss.
Mm-hmm.
Those are
the things that make sense initially. And I know we're going to get more into what treatment looked like and what life is like now. You mentioned that at one point you were writing letters to your family.
Yeah.
When did that come in?
Well, and we'll probably dissect through some of that, I would imagine. But we were 3 years into treatment, and things were looking rather grim. The cancer wasn't growing, but it wasn't going away. And we had tried multiple different chemo options, different cocktails, they called them. And the truth is my body was beginning to shut down. I would go in for chemo and I would be told to go back home and rest because my blood counts didn't meet criteria. And so after several whole blood transfusions, you start realizing with the oncologist that maybe it's time to take a break. And so as that became more and more clear, I think I started having feelings of, okay, well, if I'm not going to be able to control the outcome, if I can't beat this, then I want to make sure that that the boys will remember me.
I can't imagine. I mean, I can't imagine being in that.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, you want to make sure that they see you in all the places that are important, and that they will know what your journey was, what your story is. So we started keeping journals. I started writing letters to them and telling them about my childhood, telling them about all the things that I hoped that would matter to them, telling them the stories of when they were born and our favorite memories. And my best friend took me to buy them cards for their birthdays and for the day when they might get married, or the day that they decide to graduate, when they graduate from high school, if they ever become a parent. We went and bought all the cards.
Wow. I'm so sorry.
No, I think, yeah, no, I think it's made me stronger now. But then, I will tell you that it was the hardest, the loneliest, and just the saddest period for me. That those couple of months were some of the saddest and loneliest, because nobody could relate to me. They couldn't. In my mind, they were going to be here, and I wasn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm assuming that during that time you weren't were you still working? I mean, did you feel like you were surrounded by community, or were you just kind of mom treatment?
When we first started, so I came home from the hysterectomy and I recovered and went to chemo, and I did go back to work. I was a full-time special education teacher and a social worker with Chicago Public Schools. And I did go back to work. I loved what I did. Absolutely loved it. And brought me joy, and it gave me another sense of purpose. Being a mom gave me one purpose, and this gave me another sense of fulfillment, and I loved it. So I did go back. We also needed the paycheck, quite honestly. And I tried. I stayed in there for as long as I could. But about 2 years in, I was getting infections. I was getting sick. I was exhausted from chemo. And the doctors thought it would be best for me to go on a long-term leave of absence. And so we did. And, that in and of itself is a little bit of a loss, because if you're doing something you truly love, it does fulfill you. It does bring you joy and purpose. And that did. And so coming home, it was like, gosh, what am I going to do with myself? So it gave me a lot more time to think, a lot more time to focus on being sick. Whereas when I was working, it gave me more time to focus on the outside, and on everything else that kept my life busy and full.
Mm-hmm.
So
it has its pluses and minuses, I imagine.
It sure does. It sure does. And to say I was surrounded by community, I was. I have some of the most amazing friends, and my parents were so great about flying up to Chicago to see us. And we were flying down to Texas because in the midst of all this, the oncologist that we chose to lead our team is at MD Anderson in Houston. And so we would take trips back to Houston, and I had an amazing source of community. But even with all of that community, there were so many moments that I felt completely and totally alone.
Mm-hmm.
To be perfectly honest, I don't know that I say that very often because I don't want to upset my community, but at the same time, they were there. They brought the meals. They did the things. They gave the hugs. They listened. But there's just those times that there's not really anything anybody can do. You have to work through it.
Yeah. And I think for all of us, no matter what journey we're going through, there's moments, even for me, I'm healthy and home a lot with a 7-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 2-year-old. And there's those moments of, I don't want to, I feel alone in this yes. reality that I live in. There's that sensation of there's no way you can relate to my life. Like, tell me that you have 3 children, this age, and this financial scenario, and this type of marriage, and then let's talk. But even still, there's no way. How can anyone ever completely relate to whatever experience we are personally going through in this moment?
It's so true. It's so true. And I think it's interesting though, Mariah, for all that time, all the time leading up to it, there were moments where I'm sure that I look back and would say, well, okay, I might have felt a little alone in that, or that was kind of a lonely place to be. But I think that was the first time I recognized, it was the first time I really felt like I'm searching for anyone who can just have a conversation with me and relate to what I'm going through. Mm-hmm. And there were so few stage 4 ovarian cancer survivors within a 500-mile proximity of me that it was like, gosh, I would just love to be able to have a conversation with someone that is doing this.
Yeah.
That can just tell me I'm not the only one.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm aware of time. Let's close this out. And then for the second portion, let's go into what did treatment look like? I think more about what did community feel like? Because I imagine there must be support groups and things out there that you connected with. Anything else you want to add just about that initial diagnosis and how it settled and what that journey was like?
I think I would say this, it takes time to process anything when we're given any kind of news. And my greatest takeaway is that I needed to give myself permission to feel what it was I was feeling. I didn't need anyone to come back and give me medical stuff, or I didn't need anybody to make the picture look prettier than it did or make it seem like it was all going to be okay. I just needed to embrace the emotion and walk through it. Mm-hmm. It was all going to be okay, no matter how it worked itself out. The picture, the moments might not have been the most beautiful, but the overall picture was glorious. And I just needed to have that chance to walk through the dark so I could get to the light.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I have so much to say. Because it's true. I'm sure that there's so many women listening to this going, yeah, I relate. It's through my miscarriage that I didn't want someone to tell me it was going to be okay or to have me subdue the emotional journey.
Right.
Just let me feel this.
Yeah.
Let me be pissed off. Let me feel sad. Let me find my own moments of gratitude and my own moments of joy and be in some darkness, knowing that at some point that's going to shift. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. I hope, my hope and prayers that it blesses someone, that it gives someone else permission to be okay with not being okay for that moment.
Mm-hmm. All right. I'm excited for the next portion.
Thanks.
Don't forget to subscribe.
And if you also want to take a peek at our website, it's right here.